African Americans only make up 6% of Wisconsin's general population. However, they represent 48% of the Wisconsin prison population. Wisconsin is number 1 for imprisoning black males per capita in the entire nation. How do we understand and begin to address this disparity?
This is nothing new. I personally am a formerly incarcerated person. I did 3 prison terms. I was sentenced to a federal prison, actually out of the state of Wisconsin, for 4 years. I worked in receiving, and every week, week after week, busload after busload of predominantly young African-American boys coming into that prison with 25, 30, 40 years for drugs. And it just troubled me. A thought came to me that something's wrong with this, and it's genocide. I mean, these young men will be gone, losing the prime of their lives in a federal prison system. And it's a fact that minorities come in more contact with law enforcement than any other ethnic group. And it's because of how we're concentrated in certain low-income communities.
The disproportionate rates of incarceration in sentencing do require a local discussion. It is important to decide whether the city of Appleton is contributing to that problem or if we can be a solution.
The first step to take in addressing this issue is to look at why minorities are in prison at higher rates.
In the city of Appleton, overall crime is down. However, over the past few years, we've noticed a steady rise in violent crime. Recent trends that we've noticed is that there are gangs that stem from minority groups coming up from Chicago that are selling crack cocaine.
I think we need to own what's going on in our communities. The story of they're coming in from, fill in the blank has been going on for all too long, and it's time for us to really look at what is going on here in the Fox Valley as well as statewide. So one of the largest violations that African American and other minority offenders are being brought into prison or jail for is drug offenses. A lot of them are minor drug offenses, but it appears that minority population is actually found guilty at a much higher rate than the white population in our community and statewide.
We're fueling the system, and the fact is, we're not committing more crimes than everyone else. So we can say what we want, but the fact is they're using just as many drugs on campus as they are in the lower income communities. It's how they're policed.
The question is, how do we assure policing is fair and just? In 2011, Act 28 of Wisconsin law mandated that law enforcement were to record the race of individuals at traffic stops to discover if there was any biased policing. This law was repealed 6 months later.
I was not in favor of this legislative fix to a bigger problem than profiling. Profiling is just one part of the problem, is a discrimination that's going on in cities throughout the state and in the nation. The legislative fix did not help us deal with the underlying issues and symptoms of that greater problem.
We supported the law that would allow us to at least see the types of people that were being pulled over in the state of Wisconsin and in our communities. When we go to the police officers or the police chiefs of those communities, it's often just like we were told, it's not happening. So a bill that would allow us to actually have some kind of documentation of the types of people being pulled over, their race, it's not going to cure everything, but it'll give us a picture as to what's happening in a community, and we'll be able to know what communities are policing well and what communities perhaps need some change. Without that, it's really difficult to say this is what's going on.
We have a very definitive policy on racial profiling, and lays out very specifically what the department's expectations are in relation to that we shall not engage in that type of activity.
Beyond just preventing racial bias, the next step is how we embrace diversity and inclusion.
Diversity training is an everyday experience at the Appleton Police Department. It's about modeling behaviors. What we teach officers, they receive this message in recruit school and then our field training process and then throughout their tenure here is that focus on the behavior. Not about a color, it's not about a gender, it's not about a belief. Focus on the behavior that's in front of you or that's being reported. And be neutral on the other variables that exist regarding that.
Another concern, both in Wisconsin and nationwide, is how we sentence individuals once they are charged with a crime.
About 13 years ago, Wisconsin enacted what we call truth in sentencing. And all that means is, as a sentencing judge, the time that I give someone in prison, they sit that entire time. In the old days, if I sentenced somebody to 10 years in prison, under the law that existed before truth in sentencing, the rules were that they would sit for sure 33% of that time in prison before they become eligible for parole.
The whole Department of Corrections has seen that truth in sentencing has been a big failure. And we're seeing that mandatory sentencing is especially hitting the minority population. I think changing the whole concept of how we see incarceration and how we see corrections, how we see criminal justice in our communities in our state will impact the overall. It's certainly going to impact the minority communities as well. But until we shift from the idea that we're just simply going to punish people and lock people up for these extended amounts of time and then bringing them back out into the community, that's not working.
I think you really need to drill down even a little bit deeper. I think sometimes we look at that sentencing and really the reality of it is that's not the problem. That's a symptom of another problem. Unless we begin to treat the underlying issues of many of the crimes that exist, incarcerating people will not fix the problem.
To create opportunities and fairness, the criminal justice system needs alternatives to incarceration to help address the crimes occurring and to aid in their prevention.
My definition of an alternative court is you try to address a specific problem or a specific issue.
We have a drug treatment court, we have a mental health court, there's a Safe Streets Treatment Options program. The problem is that the funding levels for these programs are so low, the counties have to actually pay for them, where they could sentence people to prison, which is something that the state would pay for. Our community here is starting to shift that, but the burden of paying for those programs is on the county. What we're really trying to change is how the whole structure is set up, including the funding, so that funding goes to the counties to be able to implement some of these community programs and alternatives.
Solving this disparity in our prison system requires a community effort. And how can the community become involved?
Opportunities that exist for us is greater collaboration, and that collaboration comes in different ways and different times. It's not about a meeting, it's about ongoing conversations and helping both sides come together and deal with issues on a community level.
We have to look at who they're reaching out to, if it's effective, and we need cultural relevance in what we do in this state as far as programs, as far as our outreach.
The challenge is for legislators and other elected officials to actually have the courage to step forward and make an investment into these community programs, these alternatives to incarceration.
So unless we decide as a community to engage in the prevention and education opportunities and create these opportunities within a community, we will become part of that statistic. We will become and contributing to that disproportionate rate. What breaks my heart more than anything when it comes to diversity is we still get phone calls from citizens who say there's somebody suspicious walking down my street, just walking by, now they're by the neighbors. Okay, what are they doing? Well, they're not doing anything. Well, can you describe this person? Well, he's a black male. Okay, what is this person doing that's a crime or criminal activity? Well, nothing, but he's in our neighborhood and something must be wrong. So for me, what that tells me as a law enforcement executive is that we got a long way to go to working with our community to educate our citizens to say it's not about the color. That phone call tells us a lot about the beliefs and some of the discrimination that may exist because a person of color is walking in a particular neighborhood.